Hello, good evening, and welcome to another one of my every now and again broadcasts. So, first of all, thank you very much for being here. As you can see, it's just me at the moment, but I will be joined very shortly by your friend and mine, Rebecca Butler. Rebecca is just running a little bit late, but she'll be on the stream. It's nice to see you folks. So let me just I've decided to good evening, Chris, Ozzy, Simon, Jeff, and all. Thank you very much for being here. And thank you for your continued support. Now, of course, as those of you know who have followed me, I'm unable to do this via Periscope. So that's why I've changed the environment a little bit in the background because in a way I've kind of moved on. But enough of that. Enough of that nonsense. Hi, Tony and Tia Beath. That's a great name. Tia Beath. I'm pronouncing that right. Anyway, listen, thanks very much. Before we're going to talk through with Rebecca, we're going to chat through are we heading for another lockdown or not? Spoiler alert, yes. And then we're going to talk about the American election. Hi, Harry. Good to see you on the stream as well. So we got loads to talk about. But I thought with Rebecca being a little bit behind the schedule, I thought I would just flip up, if I can, a couple of things just to chat to you folks about. So what do you think of this one, folks? Sorry. Can I say, suffice to say, if you're watching this on YouTube, make sure you subscribe and also hit the notifications bell. I need your support on YouTube whilst I'm still on YouTube. And ditto on Facebook. Just make sure you follow Alt News Media on Facebook. And you'll also find the David Vance on Facebook as well. So multiple channels. Right, folks, what do you think of this news? Oh my goodness. The news is that President Trump is being discharged from Walter Reed Hospital, having gone in on Friday morning, I think it was, of last week. So, I mean, I don't know about you, but I can feel the salty tears of the BBC even as we speak. Can you imagine their horror? Because what Trump has done, and I think this is fantastic, is by the way, I see a few more people joining. Hi, City Troll, good to see you on the scope. And good to see Freedom Muhajir as well. Great to see all you folks joining me. Trump has apparently beaten COVID, and the BBC are very sad, and the New York Times are having an emotional meltdown, and CNN, well, I'm not sure, they're probably in need of deep psychiatric therapy at the moment. So I don't know what you folks reckon, and we're going to talk about Trump and all things America in due course when Rebecca joins. But it seems to me that the president has absolutely played the media. And what he's done is he's demonstrated that, yes, he's a president and all of that, but he's beaten COVID. You know, the COVID, the thing we have to run and hide from, the thing that's going to cause us so many problems. And actually, Chris sums it up. Trump won, COVID nil. You might also add, Chris, Trump won mainstream media nil as well. So this is great news. I've really enjoyed the BBC's twists and turn because, first of all, do you remember last Friday night, the president, he could be in his last legs. He might be coming out of that medical center in a box. Instead, he's going to be walking out, getting into his limo and heading back to the White House. So, but don't you think it's strange, or is it just me who thinks it's a little strange that all the top Republicans seem to be getting COVID, but not the top Democrats? Why might that be? I just don't know. But anyway, Trump's absolutely played a blinder. I have so much respect for President Trump, and this absolutely delights me. But here's another one, another quickie. These are all bonus ones. Thanks, by the way, to all of you joining. Appreciate that. If you like it, give it the thumbs up. Rishi has told us that he's going to balance the books despite the pandemic. Now, the thing about this that slightly, makes me wonder is how the hell is he going to do that when the UK has got a monumental deficit? And the only way he can do this is by incredible levels, either of tax increases or perhaps, and as well, cuts. But I don't know what he's going to cut, because the cuts, if he cuts things like pension supports and whatnot, he's going to destroy his own electoral base. So I don't know what you think of Dishy Rishi and whether or not he can actually do this. Oh, hi, Jeanette, by the way. Good to see you on the stream. Thank you for being here with me tonight. Appreciate that. Good to see you. And yes, Jer makes a very good point. They must be all very disappointed that President Trump is still alive. They absolutely are. And actually even better, as Chris points out, which is quite funny, Trump has gone into tweet overdrive. Did you see the tweets he put out? In caps as well. I mean, John Sopel, the BBC's Man in America, why John Sopel seemed just so annoyed. It's so dangerous, the president going in an hermetically sealed limo. It's so dangerous. And also, the BBC ignored the fact, by the way, that the president bought, I think, loads of pizzas, pizza slices for those of his fans standing outside supporting him. So wasn't that wonderful? President Trump, wonderful. But we will talk more about him. But yeah, Dishy Rishi, he's going to balance the books. Don't know how he's going to balance the books. Like the peace of God, it passes my understanding. And then one further one, and we will also cover this one too. Did you see that apparently kids going out for Halloween trick or treating, even trick or treating, are going to be banned? Apparently, there's more than 6 of them going out. That could put them in jeopardy from the authorities. Now then, that's all good timing, because in the background, I can see the inestimable Rebecca, who is about to join us. So with a flip the button, here she is.
Hi, David.
Hi, Rebecca. Good to see you. We've all been waiting for you, but we understand you were running late. Good to see you.
Yeah, hi, everybody. So nice to see you all again. Hi, David.
Yeah, well, as you may notice, my background's slightly different, Rebecca, because in these perilous times, I've decided to raise up above the domains, and in this way, hopefully, get a better view, if you know what I mean. So first of all, Rebecca, the most important thing, and this is what everyone really wants to know, your thoughts on Aston Villa's win against Liverpool last night.
Well, delighted. 3 points, that's all it is. And the goal difference may make a difference at the end of the season. But, of course, it does raise the bigger question is, why is every Premier League defence so poor? The really big hitters have crumbled in their defence. So much so that Specsavers offered them free eye tests today, which I thought was a complete triumph of how to run your social media accounts if you're a big corporate, is actually just to make fun of it, unlike Sainsbury's and the Co-op. And maybe it's because there aren't any crowds there and the defence is a little bit more switched off. They don't have the input of the crowd on, giving them advice, obviously, from the terraces. So, don't know, but it was a great result for Spurs as well yesterday. So, all in all, very happy Villa fan here.
Well, actually, Rebecca, I've kept this one for you because I listened to some analysis this morning on the radio, and the most interesting theory I've heard about how could this happen? How could the champions be humiliated by these Mavericks from the Midlands? And it was this is good, you'll like this one. Apparently the grass on the pitch was too long. And because of this fiendish plan by the Villa ground staff, this gave them an unfair advantage over Liverpool. Now, the person saying that was Graham Souness, who, if I remember rightly, was Liverpool player. But I just wondered what you thought of the long grass theory, Rebecca.
You may cast your mind back to the 2010 World Cup, which was hosted in South Africa, and the England team did blame the state of the pitches for their very, very parlous performance. So I think it's a load of rubbish. I think Liverpool's goalkeeper turned his eyes away off the ball. There were massive holes in their defence. They had no midfield to speak of. And I'm just crowing with absolute, yeah, thank you. Yes, Liverpool are being investigated by the police. Yeah, so I just think it was defensive failure on the part of Liverpool. And Aston Villa for years have struggled with fitness. And, you know, something I've been saying for a very long time is they can really only last 60 minutes. And that was pretty much why they got relegated. They just didn't have the physical strength. And Nigel Adkins, when he came to Southampton, that was the first thing he did, was to make the boys much, much, much fitter. Yeah. And of course, they saw successes with the FA Cup as well as the Premiership, finishing extremely well under him. And we saw the same thing with Villa, that, you know, now that they are fitter, and they can last beyond 60 minutes, it does show. So I thought they just outran Liverpool extremely well yesterday.
Well, you know, in your moment of football glory, I would just urge you to take a minute to think about my team, because Grimsby Town currently prop up the entire Football League. We are currently located bottom of the second division. We've got 0 points. So it's been a tricky start, Rebecca. And then we've had a coronavirus outbreak, and that means we've got our next 3 games have been cancelled. So So whilst you're enjoying the thrashing of the champions, I'm sitting thinking, well, I suppose, to paraphrase the song, the only way is up if you're a Grimsby fan. But anyway, enough of this football banter. Enough football banter.
I need to make one more point, though.
Well,
why can't we, seeing that it's an outdoor sport, why can't we go into the stadia? Why can't we even have alternate fans, alternate seating? We need the fans back. Chris Davis, you're right. We need the fans back. We should have fans on the terraces. For heaven's sake, they're all-seater events. Modern technology can cope with 1 meter distancing, wear a mask, just get the fans back into the stadia. That is so important. We're going to lose so many things. And, you know, it's one of our national sports. You know, we've got to have people back.
I don't know about you, Rebecca, but one of the things I find strange is if you're watching the football on the TV, and as you said, there's nobody in the stadiums, are big empty cathedrals, but you can press the button. I think you can get it with noise, with artificial crowd noise, and I find that kind of Orwellian, because they're pretending that there's a crowd there and there's nobody there. I find that odd. And
a bit like the raucous applause on Britain's Got Talent for untalented people.
Same idea, yeah. But without diversity doing routines. But anyway, listen, we have to move on, because, Rebecca, we get so much to cover. It's been a while. And of course, you can't really talk about anything without talking about coronavirus. And it's been a bit since we talked about it. And even today, as I was preparing for this, the news came that in the Irish Republic, which is our nearest neighbour and all of that, they are going to instigate what they call a level 3, a raised and elevated regime. Based, they were recommended by the equivalent of the Public Health England to go for a full-on complete lockdown of everything, everywhere. And the politicians, for the first time, have rejected what they were being advised, and they've gone for a level 3, which is still pretty draconian, and obviously going to wipe out hospitality and stuff like that, and sport. But that's happening in Ireland right now, today. I don't know if it becomes implemented tomorrow. But for us, Rebecca, since we spoke last, we have seen all kinds of things happening, and we talk about those. And I guess the top line topic is, do you think that by the time we reach the end of this month of October, by the time we're dressing up in our Halloween costumes, do you think there will be a lockdown?
On balance, yes. I think they'll take the half term as an opportunity, but I would 100% disagree with it. The first lockdown didn't work. They're not listening to all of the experts. They're only still listening to the experts to say what they want to hear. And I think they've so overly committed themselves and over embraced the imperial modeling that means that they just turn a deaf ear to anybody who disputes any of the assumptions of the imperial model. So, it is so depressing to watch what's going on. If you test more people, you'll get more cases. The point is, how many of those tests are symptomatic? And you can't even count hospitalizations now as a metric, because the criterion for admitting into hospital now is very different to the criterion for admitting to hospital back in April, May. So then you could be hypoxic, you could be below 90% on a pulse oximeter, and they wouldn't admit you. Now, if you're below 96, they'll admit you. So it's all down to deaths. That is the only metric. And the death rate from COVID has now been overtaken by the influenza rate of COVID. So, the metrics on which you measure how lethal this is, and it was lethal. Let's not forget how lethal this virus was when it first hit the elderly. The lethality has dropped because many, many, many more of us have had it on certain models. Many more of us have had it or have some immunity to it that they can't measure, namely T-cell immunity, because they can't measure that. But we've all been exposed to so many coronaviruses before. They're saying that there is a transferable immunity on the T cells, the killer cells. So, I just think the government has really just gone down the rabbit hole, and they're refusing to come out. For God's sake, they've got an 80-seat majority. They will be forgiven for saying, look, we're sorry, we did our best, but now we've changed our mind. We feel that other things are as important as COVID, the economy, jobs, potential poverty, cancer screening, so on and so forth. And in the round, we don't regret the first lockdown. We're not going to lock down again because actually we know it doesn't work. But,
they're not going that way, are they? The thing is, we've talked about this, Rebecca, over all the months, and I think we've both kind of appealed to the science. And the difficulty, as you've just explained, is this government is only interested in one particular set of views, which basically drive them, as you said, down the rabbit hole. I reckon Boris has plunged to the bottom so far down the rabbit hole. I can't see any way that he'll ever come back up, because that would have to admit that they got it wrong. And I mean, it was a collective decision, obviously, but collectively they did get it wrong. And so, on back to main topic, I think that the likelihood of a lockdown to me is inevitable. And for me, Rebecca, it's being driven by this whole issue of rising cases. No one talks about the fact that the mortality rate is still very, very low versus, for example, I think it's in September, it was the 23rd, there was 23 other causes of death above COVID. So that was that. But they're not, but it's like they're not interested in facts anymore.
I mean, one thing that does strike me is if you look at the testing, every single therapeutic medicinal test, every single one has either a false positive or a false negative Every single one has that rate. And what we've been told by the manufacturers of the PCR test is that there is a 10% false positive. But Matt Hancock hasn't got this right. He doesn't understand the numbers. He doesn't understand how this works. They've done 20 million tests. It's 10 million of the 10% of 20 million is false positive. That's 200,000 tests. 200,000 cases have been attributed to COVID wrongly, which coincidentally reduces the case count to about 300,000 now. I think it's about 500,000 today had positive COVID tests. So that's 300,000 people. And you've got to be really careful here, because if you then put those deaths in, then deaths attributed to COVID on 300,000, it does put the infection fatality rate up. It makes it look more like SARS-1 than just influenza, which if you took the totality of positive cases at 500,000, it currently looks like influenza fatality. If you take away the false negatives, it does effectively double the infection fatality rate. So this is still a very dangerous bug. And that is a point that has to be stressed. But nobody bothers with the fact that influenza can kill 50,000 people a year. I mean, in 2016, 17, 20,000 people died. Coincidentally, the same number died in Germany that year. And Angela Merkel says the 9,000 who've died of COVID is worse than the Second World War. I really don't know where she gets her numbers from, and she clearly didn't spend the war in a concentration camp. But the case fatality rate is low, and we can't continue this psychodrama of businesses not knowing how to plan. We're killing. Cineworld has gone. Massive business has gone. That is the first of many. We're used to hearing high street chains saying like we're going to become more online and shutting their shops. This is a business that's gone to the wall. Rolls-Royce going to the wall. Jeff, why are all countries going down the same path? I don't think it is an answer to say, well, just because they did it, we're going to do it as well. And the simple fact is, if you roll back, Jeff, to where we were last December, January, we were watching the Communist Party of China, the CCP, were doing ready build. And what we were being told, they were hospitals. They weren't hospitals. Those were quarantine centers. We then saw the disease hit Italy. And I remember we discussed why Italy was such closely with China. And of course, the average age in Italy is significantly higher than the average age in China. Plus, they have higher intergenerational living in China. So we didn't have care homes. And all of the pictures coming from Italy's hospitals was they were ventilating geriatrics.
Which kills them.
And, our anaesthetists very quickly said, well, no, we don't do that in the UK. And this is not a ventilator issue. We knew very early on this was an inflammatory disease. Our anaesthetists knew back at the beginning of February that CPAP was the maximum we were going to need to do to the patients. So we had these horror pictures from Italy. The Western world has the highest average age. Just look at it, Google it. Africa, the average age is, in the 40s. In the Western democracies, the average age it's like up in the 70s, 78 or something. And a woman's life expectancy now on actuarial tables is 85.
Yeah, which is so much older than us men, which is sexist, by the way.
Sorry.
Yeah, so just, let's not talk about that. But actually, I wanted to go back because a couple of things there. Going back to why is everybody following the same model, more or less, with the odd exception, Sweden being probably most notable. But I would suggest, Rebecca, that one of the reasons, and it links to what you've said, the World Health Organization has been a fundamental driver of global response to COVID. And of course, we do know that the Chinese Communist Party has a very close relationship with the World Health Organization, not least by putting Dr. Tedros in his little pulpit. However, I watched something last week on TV here, which amazed me. It was a press conference being held in Northern Ireland on the topic of the increasing number of positive cases, blah, 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 blah. And a question was posed to the chief medical guy that was there. And the question was about the accuracy or the frequency of tests. And he accidentally, Rebecca, started to talk about false positives. And he actually answered the question, which I've been seeking to get answered here for several weeks. What is the false positive rate here in Northern Ireland? And he told us 20 to 30% false positive, quote unquote. Now, again, as you say, Hancock and co don't understand these simple mathematics. But when you apply that percentage, which made me almost fall off my settee, that essentially means that the vast number of positive cases, false positives, and yes, there still are people getting it. And in the autumn, as far as I recall, respiratory diseases do come back in the autumn. But the false positive thing is not understood by the politicians. It's fundamentally important because if you take it into consideration, it does mean that the fatality rate in some regards, if you get this, and if you're of the wrong age with the wrong comorbidities, it is a very dangerous thing to get. But again, you and I have never said otherwise.
Influenza.
Yeah.
So influenza. So
correct.
You know, if you or I got cancer with no comorbidities, we would probably survive it.
Yeah.
But if I had a comorbidity, I would probably die from cancer. So yes, the more unhealthy you are, the more unhealthy you get, right? So I mean, it's not
obvious.
What the thing that frustrates me, and this is as a clinical person, and I even commented it on tonight. Watching the news, they have this, standard stock image of somebody taking a PCR test, a swab, and then they break the swab on the lid.
Yeah.
The PCR test is looking for the viral RNA strand, okay, and it goes through amplifications to find it. Okay, so it's the viral load of the patient or the testee, because they're not patients, they haven't got the illness, they just got the RNA particle. They will keep,
amplifying it,
amplifying until they get so many cycles through. And if so many cycles, they can't find any RNA, then it's stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So the problem is watching, because this is done on mass testing, there is a huge amount of cross-infection, cross-contamination, because the people doing the testing are wearing gloves, mask, apron to protect themselves. So if at the beginning of the day they swab an infected patient's tonsils, pull the swab out, put their hand in the glove on the outside of the thing, they will cross-contaminate every single specimen, potentially at the whole testing center, but definitely every single specimen for the rest of the day will be cross-examined by each person who comes across a true positive patient. And so when when these, it's very seldom, I think only Julia Hartley Brewer has ever put false positives to Matt Hancock, and even she got it wrong. She didn't put it to him that it's not 1% of positive cases, is 1 or 10 or whatever it is, total case. Precisely because one of the false positives is contamination. The other is circulating RNA particles. They're in the atmosphere, they're vaporized, they're aerosolized. So, you know, the scope for 95% false positive increases the more the infection takes hold in society, so much so that you could test a testing kit and it will have PCR on it. It will come up PCR positive.
Well, let me tell you a little apocryphal story. Now, this is from a very reliable source I have, and it relates to a lady and her daughter who weren't feeling very well, and they thought that they would go to the local test center to get themselves checked out. Okay, when they arrived at the local test center, there was a big queue, a very big queue. So they decided they'd just go home and stay safe and stay indoors and not go out and spread it and stuff like that. And the thing is, though they had registered with to the center that they were coming, a couple of days later, they got back 2 positive tests. They didn't take the tests. How is that possible?
That's well, that is a whole other side, which is the technology is, well, David, I have said time and time and time again, our public services are not fit for purpose. Leaving the NHS in charge of people's health? No, because the NHS is an employer. First and foremost, it employs people. The fact that it employs people to look after people is irrelevant. First and foremost, they are an employer and they look after their employees first and foremost. So Public Health England, Quango, useless. NHSX, Quango, useless. And so when people scream and shout about we shouldn't privatize the NHS, what they are effectively doing is they are subjecting us to more of the same crap. We need a system like Germany, which has private test centers that do profit, but let's be honest, it's being done for profit now. Dido Harding, Dido was a very good singer. She's pretty crap at testing and tracing.
I've got all her stuff. I've got all Dido's stuff. Yeah. White Flag, I remember.
I think her life's for rent right now, frankly.
But hey, Rebecca, don't you think, going back to Matt Hancock for a moment, don't you think it's pretty shameful that the guy, the health secretary, doesn't understand some of these basic things? I mean, does he not understand them, do you think? Or does he not want to talk about things like false positive percentages and stuff? Is it just ignorance or is it something else? Well, what do you think?
As I said before, I think he injects Red Bull behind his eyeballs. Honestly, I don't know what I think about Matt Hancock. If we had Maggie in charge now, like Angela Merkel, Maggie was a chemist. She was a scientist. She understood science. We have had generation after generation of Oxford predominantly, Oxford educated student union debaters who do the humanities, PE, although that's kind of economics, a bit of maths in there, historians, literature, classicists, so on and so forth, all well and good, but they're not particularly numerate. And we know that. I mean, it's not just Diane Abbott who isn't numerate, because Priti Patel isn't particularly numerate either.
No.
And so we have people without a scientific rigor.
I think so. Yeah.
They're more worried about headlines than they are with actually, piling down into the numbers. And they think we don't understand numbers. They treat us all like idiots. So you see, they'll never go into detail about anything on any of their broadcasts.
Yeah, Rebecca, the question's been asked, and I should get you to put it to you. I put it to you, my learned friend. Should Boris have stayed with herd immunity, basically? The stuff that he talked about back in February that I felt pretty good about. Do you think he should have stuck with that? Or do you think he had no choice but to change and go down the lockdown route?
The Gompertler curve of epidemics does that, right? And everybody under that line on the epidemic curve dies. That's what an epidemic curve is deaths under there.
Yeah.
What a lockdown does is it simply extends the time axis along the x-axis along the bottom. The same number of people will die, come what may.
Yeah.
So where we are now, and one of the biggest policy mistakes I think they're doing is locking up these students and isolating from each other. Because actually, once you've got a positive case in those halls of residence, you shouldn't be restricting them to their rooms. You shouldn't be forcing them into quarantine. You should be saying to them, sorry, you can't go out into society because this is a potential super spreader event. But don't worry, here's a dining hall, here's your food, carry on with your lectures and continue. Now, somebody might die if you do that, okay? Somebody might die from COVID if you do that, but 150 students every year die of meningitis during Freshers' Week. There are those who are asthmatic who will get influenza. There are those who are immunosuppressed who will get glandular fever from kissing too many people in Freshers' Week. People die all the time. So yes, maybe one or two would die from COVID if you did that, but that is what herd immunity is. So if it was me, which regrettably it never will be, if I was the PM, I'd say don't imprison them in their rooms. Just give them normality within their halls.
Yeah.
You're in isolation, but you're in block isolation. You're in a group isolation. Then when they go home at Christmas, they're not going to kill their granny, as Matt Hancock so nicely said. They will protect their granny by having been already infected.
I think actually, Rebecca, just on the kill the granny thing, one of the things that irritates me the most is this cliche line that they and it's not just cliche, it's hypocrisy. This was the same government that discharged many very elderly and vulnerable patients from NHS hospitals into care homes where they were essentially left to rot and die, and that's exactly what happened. But I have sympathy for students because I remember being in first year. I remember Freshers' Week. I remember all these things, and these kids. I think at the moment the media keeps playing these massive infections, 600-700 students, all positive, and of course the implication is that they're all symptomatic. They're all unwell, which of course is, as you said earlier, likely 90 to 95% of them are probably asymptomatic or fine without any problems at all. But it's like the kids, the young students are the ones that are being put through a particularly gruesome form of social isolation. In fact, my old halls of residence in Belfast, Queen's University halls of residence, one of those halls is locked down with God knows how many hundreds of students inside it, so it is disturbing to see these kind of they're all knee-jerk reactions, aren't they? They're not thought through and they're not considered, and it won't end well for us, I think.
Well, Manchester Metropolitan, Glasgow Strathclyde,
Mm.
Edinburgh. You know what they've done to those students is awful.
Yeah.
It's contrary to their human rights. It's actually contrary to the current legislation anyway. They have no power to basically lock them in. You know, you have enforcement powers if somebody breaks the law, but you don't have the ability to detain people.
Yeah. Yeah.
The rule of habeas corpus in this country. And you know, the response has been absolutely appalling. Basically, I knew in April, because my neighbour works at King's College London, I knew in April that they were not doing live teaching until January 2021 at the earliest. I knew that in April. So universities have conned those kids. And of course, because of the teacher assessed grades, the universities have had a bumper year.
Yes, as well. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
Been this full. They have never had so much demand for their courses, so much demand for their accommodation. Universities are first and foremost slum landlords. That is their primary aim. Secondary is to charge you as much fee as they possibly can for a course that's not going to get you a job at the end of it. They are big, big business. So they don't care that they've lied to these students. They've got all their money up front. They're not going to give them refunds on their money. And they are behaving just as I'd expect Xi Jinping of the CCP to behave. They're behaving like communist dictators.
Yeah, I mean, I put up this comment here, but this is my old university. They're charging apparently these lockdown kids £210 for a food parcel, and apparently what's the contents are worth about 55 quid. But it goes back to your point. They are absolutely raking the cash in. They're milking the students. But isn't it strange, Rebecca, that as people like us, people on the conservative right, if you like, who are actually expressing outrage about this, the media don't seem too concerned about it at all. I don't really see Labour getting off their high horse on it. So it's a peculiar world we live in, don't you think, in 2020?
Well, the National Union of Students brought out in a big flourish when the students were posting, you know, hostage messages on their windows. The National Union of Students on that day chose to publish its critical race theory document on how to decolonize the curricula. In my days of being an absolute firebrand, I'd have been marching. I would have been on strike as a student union member. I'd have been out absolutely thrashing Nicola Sturgeon's government for what they were doing. Critical race theory? What are you talking about? Your students are imprisoned. Your members are being imprisoned. What are you going to do about it? They're just pathetic.
It is. I agree with you. It is really strange the way that the students have been, in a sense, abandoned by the National Students' Union. But also, I mean, I wonder how come so many young students today don't have the firebrand thing within them. Is it because, this is my theory, they've been so softened up by social media, by Twitter, by Facebook, by all the rest of it, that their ability to rebel, to question, to really challenge has been weakened. They're basically, I think they're not as strong as possibly we were, back then.
I think they're intimidated by their own cancel culture. I think that's what it is. I mean, if you ask them to do something in a mob, they'll go and do it. But the days of the gobby people like me who stood on a soapbox, what do we want? We don't know. But when do we want it? We want it now. I mean, the individual firebrands, they've gone. They've completely gone. You ask them to go and beat up the police on a Black Lives Matter protest, and there'll be a rush for the door. But ask them to do something as an individual. I think they are actually scared of cancel culture. I really think they are.
And I think you're right. But Rebecca, we have to, despite the ever sort of increasing areas of conversation around coronavirus, we now have to jump on a flight and we got to go across the Atlantic. Yes, because we've got less than a month to go before the US goes to the polls. And I'm reminded of, the old expression, if America sneezes, the rest of the world catches the cold. And regardless of where you stand on what happens on November the 3rd, I don't think anybody can deny that it's going to have vast significance for the rest of the world. And so I don't know where you think this is going to go. It's been almost beyond belief this last number of days with Trump being tested positive, going in, getting his cocktail of whatever, and I believe leaving hospital as well. Between that and Joe Biden in his bunker, and yet ahead in all the polls, apparently, it's what a mad world. What do you think of what's going on across in the States?
Well, I think the media is making the same mistake this year as they did back in 2016. I actually was in LA working at the time of the 26th, at the run-up. In fact, this time of year, exactly this time. And I remember speaking to my son, who at the time funded a lot of his university luxuries by betting, and he used to bet on political outcomes. And he'd put $100 on Trump, which was £100 on Trump at 9-1 when Trump said he was going to run. He was very long odds at the time. So my son was slightly worried about his £100 because it was a lot of money. And I said to him, you know what, your money is safe, mate, because you are going to make a lot of money. CNN hounding Trump the way they did, it was just putting people's backs up. And Hillary was 14% points ahead of Trump at this stage of the race. So
don't believe the poll.
Remain was 10% ahead of Leave all the way up until the Comres poll the day before the referendum, which was the only poll that got it right. But polls, it's the media, David. It's the media that is the problem. And I did just want to spin back ever so quickly when one of your viewers said, why is one government following the other? Well, as you know, I've lived around the world. I still travel around the world: America, India, Australia, Singapore. I'm in touch with all of my friends across the world and dinner parties with them. Everybody has the same conversation. The media is broken in every single country I go to. The media is broken according to people. It's not just us. It's broken in America. It's broken in Australia. It's broken in India. It is broken everywhere. So it's the media that is dictating. And so what they do, classic example, right? Who cares, right, whether Donald Trump had oxygen?
Yeah, it doesn't matter. Yeah, I agree.
Didn't have oxygen. The question is, what is happening to him right now? 2 days ago, right now. Is he on oxygen now? No. Has he been on oxygen recently? No. Has he ever been on oxygen? I can't comment on that.
Yes, right. Yeah. But
who cares? Why does it matter to Fox, CNN, you name it? Who gives a damn whether he was on oxygen or not?
Because Fox, CNN, NSBC, all of these stations, to my mind, are repeating their mistakes of 2016, Rebecca. no doubt in my mind, they are, they're so determined to try and get Biden, and Biden, to my mind, I don't know what you think. I did not like Hillary Clinton at all, but she was relatively competent in certain ways, and certainly she could remember things. She knew which day of the week it was, for example, because someone might have to be suicided. However, Biden, I think, he clearly suffers from a degree of early onset dementia, which is very sad, by the way, to see. Sad to see. Take no pleasure in it.
Early onset, I think it's entirely appropriate for his age.
Yeah, he's 78, isn't he? He's not exactly. Trump's a spring chicken at 74, but Biden's like the worst candidate possible, and yet the media are praising him like he's John F. Kennedy, and they're going to end up with egg all over their face, maybe on November the 4th.
He's got the charisma of a dead rabbit. He just is. He just comes across as quite aggressive. I find his manner really, really quite unpleasant. But like the tax issue, okay? If I was Donald Trump, and this is the problem, I'm not Donald Trump, but if I were Donald Trump and I'd been asked about my income tax, I would have pointed out that I hadn't taken any income for 4 years, because he offloaded, as we know, all of his businesses. It was handed around the family. He's not taken any income, and he's not had any income as a president. His $500,000 US per year, he has forsaken. So surely he should be saying, I haven't taken a salary. Have you? Have you taken a salary, Mr. Biden? How wealthy are you? And you're still taking a salary as a senator?
Well, I actually did a video thing yesterday with on another network, and one of the questions that they asked was actually, Rebecca, linked to this. They were saying to me, how come Trump doesn't talk about, for example, all the jobs that he's helped create in the States, about the peace deal that he's done, for example, between Israel and UAE, the Emirates. How come he doesn't talk about, for example, all those many achievements he's made? But my answer is because the media, the fake news media, they won't let him. They honestly want. If he found a cure for cancer tomorrow, they'd turn around and say, yes, but tell us more about Russia collusion. The media. You're right, Rebecca, and this has been my message for a long time. The media is poison, absolutely poisonous. And the difference between 2016 and 2020 is the big tech media, now being the Facebook, Twitter, so on and so forth, they've flipped, and they're also vehemently trying to get Trump out. So, I think they're all going to be very disappointed. And that's because the people maybe that you met, Rebecca, in LA, and the people I know across the States, ordinary people too, just ordinary working people, they know that Trump is all that stands between them and some, for example, of the riots that we've seen in the Democrat cities and the reduction of law and order, which seemingly is okay. So, it's apparently it's a criminal offense for Trump to go for a drive in a limousine outside the hospital, but BLM riots, yeah, fine, knock yourself out, not a bother. That speaks to the media, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely it does. And, I do think Trump ought to himself concentrate on his positives. I think Trump lets himself down so badly. People may kick and scream about Trump being elected, but if you're a pensioner or you have any benefit from the stock market, Trump has kept you much wealthier than Hillary, because Hillary, let's face it, Democrat in the US is as right wing as the Tory party is here.
Yeah.
nevertheless, that they're more willing to spend, taxpayers' money. Of course, tax rate in America and the corporation rates are very low. So it's a very pro-business environment, and they're all in for taxing people more. But, something that really got me, and, I used to do neurolinguistics, so this really, really did wind me up during that debate. The moderator kept calling Mike Pence vice president.
Mm-hmm.
He's not the vice president. He hasn't been the vice president for 4 years. He can't call him vice president. Sorry, Biden.
Biden,
Yes, he kept calling Biden Mr. Vice President. Well, Pence is the vice president.
Yeah, I know.
Well, he's Mr. X, voted out vice president. He's just Senator Biden. Why would you deliberately, and it wasn't once, it was every single time he referred to him or spoke to him or invited him to speak, he said, "Your turn, Mr. Vice President."
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the Chris Wallace was a disgraceful host, but I'm not actually sure, given what's happened to President Trump this last few days, I'm not sure the second debate will take place. But interestingly, this weekend, we've got a debate between Kamala Harris and Mike Pence. And I think that'll be interesting.
I'm really interested to see what Mike Pence is like on the stage. I suspect, he's been very, very loyal to Trump, never broken ranks.
Yeah.
And I really quite like the fact that the Wednesday rally this week is a MAGA rally. So he's keeping the message going and keeping the message, the people. I think, I'm just interested to see what happens with Kamala and Mike Pence. I really am going to, again, watch that. I don't think Trump should do a second debate. I really don't think he should, because he won't really be on the money. I thought he was okay in the first debate. I didn't think it was that much of a car crash, but I think that's only relative to Biden. I think they were both awful, but relative to each other, there was nothing between them.
I think what for what it's worth, what I think about Trump in the first debate was, Trump is kind of like a guy whose default mode is to go on the attack. Now, I fully understand that, because I'm like that. And it's not advisable. I have to say, folks, I understand some of my own weaknesses, and so I will go very aggressive, and people don't like that. And actually, you always achieve more by selling a positive, Rebecca, don't you, than telling someone why the other person is so negative, I think. So I kind of agree. Although I still think the best bit from the 2016 campaign was, do you remember when he was debating Hillary Clinton, and she said, "I'm just glad that this guy's not in charge of law and order," and he quipped, "Yeah, because you'd be in prison." That was that possibly won the election for him, So, and he's good at that. He's good at that kind of stuff, for sure.
Yeah. You have to remember, though, that this time the election is already happening. These huge numbers of postal votes have been sent out. A lot of people, it's a bit like Brexit, when the final analysis was done, and I think this pretty much works for most democracies. You'll have people like me who are staunch leavers, okay? 33%, you can't tell me not to be a leaver. 33%, you can't tell me not to be a Remainer. Absolutely polarized binary views. How Brexit won, and I think how Trump won last time, actually how Nick Clegg won in the 2010 election, was that the debates are all about the middle.
In the middle, they are. Yep.
Why Matthew Elliott was so brilliant on the Leave campaign was he wasn't interested in the Leave voters he knew he had in the bag. He was looking at the lost 33, never registered to vote, no interest in politics.
Yeah.
And what did he do? He attracted them by getting them to vote for their favorite football teams and doing Facebook quizzes and things. And this was harvesting all their data and then bombarding them with pro-Leave stuff. It's very, very clever, very well established. By the way, that's what the Dems did in 2010 as well. Matthew Elliott was not the first to engage Cambridge Analytica. Hillary Clinton and Obama both had Cambridge Analytica on their side in the previous two elections. So it's always the 33% in the middle. Now, that 33%, a lot of them are going to be postal voters. Are they going to wait for the day? Probably, because if they're undecided, many of them will have thrown their ballot away or will wait to think, is there going to be a game changer here? I'm not quite sure. I'm not going to do it yet. So there is all to play for, but I do worry because of America's historical problems with voter fraud, which we have as well, by the way, as a problem. Postal fraud is a major issue. I do worry that the loser will not accept the result.
And that's what I think. Again, Rebecca, we are aligned. My big concern is on the night of November the 3rd, Trump will be seen to have won at that point. But there will be millions of mail-in votes. And for me, this explains so much. The Democrats will then say, well, actually, no, you haven't won. We can sit back. Once we count those, we'll have flipped some of the key states. And you're going to get this hell of a row. And I would love to think there will be a clear result on November the 4th. I don't think there will. That's why the Democrats know that will go to the Supreme Court. And as you know, the Supreme Court at the moment, there's only 8 on it, not the decisive 9. And that's why they're so hell-bent not to prevent the president's nomination for that.
Majority, though. They do still have a majority.
They're the Republicans.
Yeah, because it's still 5-3.
Yeah, but but I think having that additional voice, I think, would be very helpful. I always judge the Democrats; they're determined not to get that. Now, okay, you could say if he gets that judicial appointment onto the Supreme Court, that could change things for potentially, decades, arguably, or longer. So it is seismic. I agree with you on that. But I think this is going to get very messy. And I don't know about you, but I don't think I'll be waking up, toasting a victory with champagne. I would like to think that, but I think it's going to be more difficult. And the media will also, I believe, on the morning of the November 4th, 5th, they'll turn around and say, he won that part of the vote, but the mail-in vote, it's changed everything. So,
but if the mail-in vote is across the board, fraudulent, distorted, whatever, across the board, because they have basically the first past the post system that we have. They have the electoral college, which we call constituencies.
Yeah.
If it is at a background level, then it shouldn't affect the result because it will still be down to those 33%.
Oh, it's the middle. It's always the middle. And you're right. And actually, Rebecca, I think it's less than 33% because I think by this point, most people have made up their mind. Do they want Trump? Do they want Biden? The difference is stark. But there will be those people in the middle, and those people in the middle might be smaller than 33%. But they're the people that Trump needs to appeal to, because that will swing the election. But I think he was quite clever in the first debate because he did try to get Biden to seem extreme, which is pretty easy because Biden won't condemn BLM rioters or Antifa rioters, and he does support the Green New Deal that he said he didn't support. So Trump is, if nothing else, and because he's a business guy, he understands strategy. He is a good strategist, even though I know his personality is Marmite, and I get all that, but he's a strategist.
But he doesn't. This is the problem with Trump, you see. Why try to get Biden to condemn something? I wouldn't do that. I would just say, Well, you clearly don't condemn it because you've endorsed it. I have never seen you and your Democrat governors have not called in the National Guard.
Nope.
That is a statement of fact. So, Mr. Biden, I don't need you to admit or deny. It's clear that actions speak louder than words. Next question, please. Because nobody in America can have missed the Black Lives Matter protest. They cannot have missed what's happened in Portland, Oregon, in Kentucky,
Seattle, all those places. And
the, law and order. This was how Nixon won. Nobody thought he was going to win, but he won it exactly. The silent majority, as Nixon called them. Nixon won on law and order. Now Trump has got to be miles ahead on law and order. Miles ahead. Because all of the Republican governors stamped down. It was Democrat cities, states that suffered the most, and those are small businesses that have suffered. Has seen it on their television, and they've heard the bonkers California nut jobs. The people in the Republic of California saying it's reparations for slavery taking. It's a reparation. Suck it up, guys. So I don't know. I think the media overestimates its own value when it comes to elections every single time.
Look they do.
Did to Modi. They'd never thought for a minute he'd get in, and he absolutely smashed it.
And I think that's where we can all take quite confidence in the fact that they're arrogant, pompous, and think that they can tell people what to do. People will decide ultimately, and certainly my hope is that America makes the right decision, re-elects Trump, and we get another 4 years of a functioning America. It is telling, Rebecca, that the Chinese Communist Party are pretty keen, I think, to see Biden in the White House. And that's really all anyone needs to know. The greatest menace to this our globe at the moment, pretty keen to get Uncle Joe back into the White House. But listen, as is always the way, Rebecca, our time is flowing. The hour has gone by. It's gone over, in fact, a little. But listen, as always, can I a big thank you to you, first of all, for being with us this evening. Thank you very much. Thank you to all of those who are watching. Thanks for all your comments. Too many to read, but nonetheless, thanks for that. And I hope to be back with you hopefully later on in the week. And don't forget, by the way, that despite my death on Twitter, you can find me in Parler, on Facebook, and in other places. And I hope we can catch up with each other soon. But that's it from me. Good night.
And from me, good night. And it's so nice to see you all again.
Good night, everyone.